The summer of 1997 started like any other, with long, lazy days and exciting plans. I was 15 years old at the time, and spent most of my time with my best friend Stephanie and her sisters Sophie, 13, and Maya, 16. We were as close as family, and I often went on vacations with them to their grandmother's beach house. We shared a sisterly bond, and I always felt like I was part of their family. That summer, just before another trip to the beach, Stephanie's parents signed us up for a nearby church camp. It was one of those camps that seemed perfect on the surface, filled with fun activities, a huge lake, live music, and plenty of outdoor games. We were excited, but nothing could have prepared us for the eerie events that would unfold. Stephanie and I, being typical teen girls, immediately set off to explore the campgrounds and scout for cute boys. It wasn't long before we met a girl named Lydia. She was 15 just like us, and we clicked right away. Lydia and her family were part of the live music band performing at the camp, so after they finished their set, we all exchanged contact information and promised to stay in touch. A few weeks later, true to her word, Lydia and her family came to visit our church. They performed again, and Stephanie's mom, always the welcoming type, invited Lydia over for dinner. That night, dinner started off like any other. We chatted about all kinds of things, school, music, and funny memories. Sophie, being her usual goofy self, told us about a strange dream she'd had. We all laughed because her dream was so ridiculous, full of talking animals and silly situations. But the mood shifted when Stephanie's dad started sharing his dream. It wasn't funny at all, he said, his voice unusually serious. In my dream, I was running through the woods. Everything seemed normal at first, but the deeper I went, the trees began to change. They became twisted. Their branches forked like witching trees. He hesitated, his eyes dissolving. She came out of nowhere. Before he could finish, Lydia, who had been sitting quietly beside him, suddenly grabbed his arm. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with something that bordered on madness. "Oh, that was me," she said in a low, haunting voice. The entire room fell silent. Stephanie's dad froze, staring at her in shock. Lydia didn't stop there. She leaned in closer to him, her grip tightening. "I was sent to help you," she continued, her voice eerie. "I told you to follow me, because they were coming. If you hadn't listened, they would have taken your soul for sure." A chill ran through the room. Stephanie's dad looked at her, speechless, his face drained of color. None of us moved. The air in the room felt heavy, thick with an oppressive tension that none of us could explain. My heart was racing, and I could see from the corner of my eye that Stephanie's sisters were just as terrified. Then, in an effort to break the unbearable silence, I did what I always do in awkward or tense situations. I made a joke. "Well, that was disturbing," I said with a nervous laugh, trying to lighten the mood. It didn't really work, but at least it helped us shift away from whatever strange thing had just happened. Lydia remained calm, sipping her drink quietly as if nothing unusual had occurred. After dinner, she invited us girls to a slumber party at her house the following weekend. Despite what had just happened, we all agreed. I mean, it was the 90s and sleepovers were a huge part of our lives back then. We figured maybe Lydia had just been messing with us, trying to scare us with some bizarre act. But as the week went on, I couldn't shake the weird feeling that something was off. We had been to Lydia's house a few times before the slumber party, and every visit had left us with a lingering unease. Lydia had this habit of talking about strange, almost supernatural things. During one visit, we were hanging out in her bedroom, which was upstairs, when she pointed out her window toward a large church in the distance. It wasn't right in front of her house, but you could still see it clearly from her window. "You see that church?" Lydia asked, her voice low and eerie. "I've seen things there. Shadow people, ghouls even. They follow people right up to the church door, and when the service is over, they wait. Then they follow them home again." We had all laughed nervously, not knowing if she was serious or just trying to creep us out. But the way she said it, the way her eyes lingered on that church as if she could see something none of us could, it made us all feel uneasy. Lydia's house was modern for the 90s, with new stylish furniture that felt out of place against the heavy atmosphere her stories brought into the room. The day of the slumber party arrived, and Stephanie picked me up along with her sisters Sophie and Maya. The whole car ride was filled with chatter and excitement about the weekend ahead. We planned to stay up late, watch movies and gossip, all the usual things teenage girls did. But the moment we pulled up to Lydia's house, that strange feeling in my gut returned. Her home was massive, an old Victorian-style mansion that seemed to loom over us, casting long shadows in the evening light. It looked like something straight out of a Gothic novel, with ivy crawling up its walls and dark windows that seemed to stare down at us. We rang the doorbell and waited. As we stood on the porch, I glanced up, and that's when I saw her. Lydia was in one of the top windows watching us, but it wasn't just that she was looking. It was the way she looked at us. Her eyes were wide, unblinking, and there was something about her expression that sent a shiver down my spine. It wasn't excitement or happiness that I saw on her face. It was something else, something darker, almost as if she was anticipating something. We waved, expecting her to come down and greet us, but she didn't. She just stood there staring. The door creaked open a few moments later, and it wasn't Lydia who greeted us. It was her mother. She was a tall, thin woman with hollow cheeks and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Lydia's upstairs," she said in a voice that sounded almost mechanical. "Go on up." Reluctantly, we made our way inside. The house was unsettling, not in its decor. It was modern, the furniture new and up to date. But in its atmosphere, the air was stale, and there was a faint musty smell that lingered in the hallways. As we climbed the stairs, the floorboards creaked beneath our feet, each step echoing through the empty house. When we finally reached Lydia's room, she was sitting on her bed smiling at us, as if nothing strange had happened earlier. But that weird vibe, the one I'd felt all week, was still there, lingering just beneath the surface. The night started off normally enough. We played some games, watched a movie, and talked about boys. But as the hours went on, things started to change. The lights in the house flickered occasionally, and every now and then I'd hear what sounded like footsteps in the hallway, even though no one else was supposed to be upstairs. At one point, Sophie nudged me and whispered, "Do you feel that? It's freezing in here." She was right. The room had grown unnaturally cold. Lydia didn't seem to notice, or if she did, she didn't care. She was acting strange. Her eyes would drift off, as if she were listening to something none of us could hear, and every now and then she'd murmur things under her breath, words we couldn't quite make out. Then around midnight everything changed. We were sitting in a circle playing a game of truth or dare, when Lydia suddenly stood up. Her eyes were glazed over, and her face was expressionless. She walked over to the window, the same one she'd been staring out of earlier, and whispered, "They're here." The room went silent. "Who's here?" Stephanie asked, her voice shaky. Lydia didn't answer. Instead, she turned toward us, her face pale and drawn. "You need to leave," she said in a flat, emotionless tone. "Now." None of us moved. We were too stunned, too freaked out to even process what was happening. "They're coming for you," Lydia continued, her eyes locking onto mine. "They've been watching, waiting. If you don't leave now, you won't make it." Panic surged through me, and I glanced at Stephanie and her sisters. Their faces were as pale as mine, fear etched into their features. Suddenly, the door to the room slammed shut on its own, the force rattling the walls. The lights flickered violently, and that strange cold presence I'd felt earlier seemed to fill the room, pressing down on us. It was suffocating, like the air had been sucked out, and I could feel something, or someone, watching us. We bolted. Without saying a word, we grabbed our things and ran for the door, our hearts pounding in our chests. Lydia didn't try to stop us. She just stood there watching, her eyes hollow and distant. I'll never forget the day my best friend, Hannah Mitchell, disappeared. It was a freezing February evening in 2013, February 6th to be exact. We were both 23, and she was a college student at Northern Valley University. I can still see her bundled up in her red jacket, excited for a weekend trip to a friend's cabin. She was looking forward to getting away from the stress of school and exams for a couple of days. But that drive, it haunts me to this day. She took Highway 44 out of Northbrook, a small town in the mountains of Maine. It's a beautiful but treacherous stretch of road, especially in the winter. You never knew what to expect on those icy, twisting roads. But Hannah had driven through worse weather before. She wasn't one to get shaken up easily, even though her old Toyota Corolla had been acting up lately. We'd all told her to get it fixed, but you know how people get when they're busy. She kept saying, "I'll deal with it after this week." That night the snow was coming down hard. I remember texting her around 6:30 p.m. just to check in, and she said she was already on the road. It was around 7:15 p.m. when an old man, George Renner, spotted her car off to the side of Highway 44. He was driving home from town and noticed her car stuck in the snowbank at a sharp curve. He said the back tires were slightly lifted, like she'd slid right into the snow. George told me later that he saw Hannah standing there, in her red jacket, just off to the side of the car. She seemed calm, maybe a little shaken up from sliding off the road, but not panicking. We offered to help, said he could give her a ride into town or help her call a tow truck, but she told him not to worry, that she'd already called AIA. Here's the thing, though, George didn't buy it. That stretch of highway barely had any cell service, if any at all, and Daiwa Way wouldn't have been able to get there quickly, not in that storm. But Hannah was polite, always had been, so she thanked him and told him everything was under control. George still felt uneasy about it, though, so when he got home, about half a mile down the road, he called the police just to make sure she was okay. By the time the police showed up, maybe half an hour later, her car was exactly where George said it would be. But Hannah, she was gone. The engine was off, the keys were still inside, along with her phone, her purse, everything. No footprints in the fresh snow, no sign of a struggle, nothing. It was like she had just vanished into thin air. I can't describe the shock we all felt when we heard the news. We searched everywhere. Days turned into weeks and weeks into months. The police interviewed everyone who had been on that road that night, but there was nothing. No leads, no clues, just nothing. A whole year passed, and Hannah was still missing. It was like the world had swallowed her whole. Then exactly 1 year later, something happened that made everything so much worse. On February 6, 2014, this strange, terrifying video was uploaded to a YouTube account called 44 Mile Marker. The name alone sent shivers down my spine, because that's where Hannah's car had been found, near the 44-mile marker on that road. The video was titled Happy Anniversary, and it was disturbing to say the least. It showed this dimly lit basement, with an old man sitting in the middle of the frame. He had these thick glasses and a completely blank expression on his face. At first, nothing happened. He just sat there staring into the camera. Then out of nowhere he started laughing, but it wasn't normal. It was this high-pitched, crazed laugh that sent chills down my spine. He laughed for what felt like forever, this horrible sound echoing in the room. Then all of a sudden he stopped. His face went completely still, and he stared directly into the camera without moving a muscle. Once, when you thought it couldn't get any creepier, he winked, slowly, and then he smiled. But it wasn't a normal smile. It stretched across his face in this wide, unnatural way that made my skin crawl. And then the screen flashed white. These bold red letters appeared. Happy Anniversary. The video ended just like that. The video spread online like wildfire, especially in those forums where people talk about unsolved mysteries. We were all terrified. Was this some kind of sick joke? Was the man in the video connected to Hannah's disappearance? I still don't know. The police tried to trace the account, but it led to a dead end. No one knew who uploaded it or why. Hannah's case remains unsolved to this day. Not a day goes by where I don't think of her, what happened on that cold, lonely stretch of highway, and if we'll ever find out the truth. When I was just just 3 years old, and my sister Elaine was 5, our family went through a big change. My dad's job in our small town had dried up, and with prices rising everywhere, my parents were struggling to keep up. So when Dad found a better-paying job in a larger city, they decided it was time to move. That's how we ended up at the farmhouse. It was a beautiful place, 4 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a massive yard, and surrounded by peaceful fields. The house was old, but it had charm, and the price too good to pass up. My parents couldn't believe their luck, and after talking to the owner, they sealed the deal. The first few days at the new house were a whirlwind of unpacking and setting things up. Mom and Dad were busy, so Elaine and I spent most of our time outside in the fenced backyard, playing in the grass, excited about all the space we now had to roam. It was during one of those afternoons that we met Ellie. She appeared suddenly, a small girl around our age, with long dark brown hair and a red dress that looked like it was from another time. We didn't think to question where she had come from. After all, we were just kids and happy to make a new friend. She seemed nice enough, and before we knew it, we were all sitting together playing with our dolls like we'd known her forever. When our mum came out to call us in for dinner, she spotted us giggling and chatting with Ellie, but when she asked, "Elaine, who are you talking to?" and Elaine pointed to Ellie, Mom's face changed. She looked confused and glanced at the spot where Ellie should have been. There was no one there. "Ellie, Mom," Elaine said, pointing at the empty air. "Our new friend." Mom hesitated for a moment, but then forced a smile. "All right, let's go inside, girls. Time to wash up for dinner." Like she probably thought we were just playing an imaginary game. But that wouldn't be the last time Ellie made herself known. That night, after dinner, Elaine and I were sent to our bedroom to play before bed. Mom walked by and heard us laughing, and when she peeked in, she found us jumping on the beds. She frowned, stepping inside. "Girls, no jumping on the beds. You know better than that." "But Ellie told us to," Elaine protested. Mom sighed. "Well, tell Ellie that no one is allowed to jump on the beds. It's dangerous." She gave us a stern look before ushering us off to bath time. We didn't think much of it. We just listened to Ellie like any kids would listen to a friend. The house quieted down after that. Mom and Dad locked up, tucked us into bed and settled in for the night. But that peace didn't last long. Sometime after midnight, my dad woke up needing to use the restroom. Groggy and half asleep, he thought he saw a faint glow outside their bedroom door. He squinted but dismissed it as a trick of his tired eyes. After all, the house was old. Maybe there was some odd wiring causing the flicker. Shrugging it off, he went to the bathroom. When he returned to bed, though, the glow was back. This time brighter, more insistent. At first, he thought maybe the TV had been left on, casting a faint light across the room. He turned to switch it off, but it was already off. That's when he felt a chill crawl down his spine. Hovering above their bed was a little girl. She had long dark brown hair, her pale face glowing softly in the dim light. She wore a red dress, the same one Ellie had been wearing earlier that day. Her eyes were blank, staring down at my parents. Dad was frozen in place, unable to move, barely able to breathe. The girl's form flickered, like a candle about to go out, but she didn't disappear. Slowly she raised her hand, reaching out toward my dad, her lips moving soundlessly. He shook my mom awake, his voice trembling. "Do you see her, the girl? She's right there." Mom woke up startled, but by the time she looked, Ellie was gone. My dad was pale, shaken, but Mom chalked it up to a bad dream, telling him to go back to sleep. The next day, Dad couldn't stop thinking about the ghostly figure he had seen. Meanwhile, Elaine and I continued to play with Ellie, oblivious to what had happened the night before. But something about the games she wanted to play became unsettling. "Let's jump on the bed," Ellie would say. "It's fun. We can jump really high. Come on." We listened to her over and over until our mom caught us again. This time, Mom wasn't so patient. She sat us down, telling us sternly that Ellie was not allowed to tell us what to do. That's when things got worse. Later that evening, my mom decided to ask the neighbors about the history of the house. What she learned made her blood run cold. Years ago, there had been a family that lived on the farm. One of the children, a little girl named Ellie, had died tragically in an accident. She had been jumping on her bed when a fire broke out. The house had caught fire so fast that Ellie hadn't been able to escape. She had died right there in the bedroom that was now ours. My parents put the pieces together. Ellie wasn't just some imaginary friend. She was a spirit, lingering in the house, trying to relive her final moments. Every time she urged us to jump on the bed, she was trying to drag us into the same fate she had suffered. After that, my parents took no chances. They brought in a priest to bless the house, and we never spoke of Ellie again. But sometimes, late at night, I swear I can still hear the faint sound of someone bouncing on the bed. Just a soft, rhythmic creak. If you made it to the end, you're awesome and I appreciate you. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed these creepy stories and want to hear more, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more spine-chilling tales. Stay safe, and I'll see you in the next one.